Only in some place like Seattle would something like this be tolerated. It's malfeasance. It's absolutely malfeasance. Pete Holmes needs to put down the bong and actually do his fucking job.
In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups. The police who investigate crime,
and the SJW district attorneys who don't prosecute the offenders. These are their stories. Last year I ended up visiting Seattle, which should be one of the richest cities in the United States. After all, that's where Amazon and Microsoft are located, two of the biggest tech companies in the world. So I expected things to be pretty nice there. Boy, was I wrong. From the ride on the airport in the taxi cab, I couldn't help but notice every open piece of land that we passed seemed to have homeless tent encampments on it. Literally, we'd be driving down the highway, and in the small grassy median on the highway, there were people living in tents. Now I ended up staying in downtown Seattle. This is the place where I think most tourists would naturally want to gravitate to. But wow, did I see some weird stuff when I was there. Like women just openly prostituting themselves, standing next to their pimps. I saw a homeless guy in front of a police officer drop his pants and literally take a shit on the street. Instead of arresting or citing the man, the police officer told him to pull up his pants. Why is this happening? Well, I put the blame squarely on Pete Holmes, the Seattle City Attorney. For those of you unfamiliar with how prosecution works in most cities in the United States, there's a division between a city prosecutor and some sort of state prosecutor, usually termed a district attorney. The city attorney prosecutes low-level misdemeanor offenses, while the district attorney prosecutes felonies. Pete Holmes is the city attorney. That means that his office's responsibility is to prosecute people who commit low-level crimes and misdemeanors. You know, things that aren't really serious, like possession of marijuana.
Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes loves to roll up that OG Pearl after a long day at work and just relax, but that actually got him in trouble, especially after he bought marijuana legally for the first time recently in Washington after they made it legal for recreational use. The only problem is, even though he was one of the first people to buy the legal marijuana, he took it to work and he got caught. Here's what he had to say. "When I bought the unopened marijuana to city offices trying to keep up with the busy schedule, I nonetheless violated the city's rules."
He's a city attorney and he's like, let's light up. Okay, let's go to work, literally. Okay, so he shouldn't have done that, obviously.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the city attorney, you should probably check the laws on whether you should bring in the weed to work.
Yes, Pete Holmes, the prosecutor for the city of Seattle, got in trouble for having marijuana at work. This is how things work in leftist Looney Tune cities like Seattle. The person in a big city that you would expect to be a symbol of authority and sobriety is in fact an avid proponent of getting high.
But the most important takeaway for everyone here is that today marijuana sales became legal. And I'm here to personally exercise myself this new freedom.
The reason I wanted to make this video is I saw this news article recently, one that talked about how Pete Holmes runs the Seattle City Prosecutor's Office. I think you'll find it very interesting. And here we go. Report: long case filing delays and dismissals continue in Seattle City Attorney's Office by Kiro News.
Now, Susan Hutchison, Harry Wampler-Weather, Wayne Cody Sports, and Nightside reporter Mark Rolstad. This is Eyewitness News at 11.
So right off the bat it says here, Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes' office declines to file charges in almost half of all non-traffic related criminal cases. So half of the time when you commit a misdemeanor crime, in Seattle, you don't get prosecuted. Half of the crimes go unprosecuted in Seattle. That's pretty bad, right? But it only gets worse. Holmes' office also takes 6 months on average to file cases when a suspect is not in custody. Why is it taking him 6 months on average to file a case when he doesn't file half of the cases? Now, I can understand if he's filing all of these cases that maybe he falls behind and it takes a while, but when you're doing literally half the job, people begin to scratch their head when you also take 6 months on average to do it. That doesn't make any sense. However, it's even worse. The sentence continues. 4 out of 10 non-traffic misdemeanor cases filed by Holmes' office achieve no meaningful resolution. So you know what this means, right? So presumably Pete Holmes, in not charging half of the cases, is getting rid of presumably the worst cases that get submitted to his office. But even then, even just declining half of the cases police send him, he still manages to lose 4 out of 10 cases. That's mind-boggling. So if Pete Holmes ends up declining half of all cases, and then he screws up 40% of the cases he does end up filing, that effectively means that less than a third of misdemeanor crimes where police arrest an offender end up with convictions in Seattle. Less than a third. That's amazing. All right, let's continue on with the article. Police spend tens of thousands of hours developing misdemeanor cases that either never get filed or the cases sit at the city attorney's office for such a long time that they eventually get dismissed, according to the report. Yeah, it's a tremendous waste of taxpayer resources and dollars. Only in some place like Seattle would something like this be tolerated. It's malfeasance. It's absolutely malfeasance. Pete Holmes needs to put down the bong and actually do his fucking job. The article continues. In many businesses that face major issues with crime, underreport it because doing so seems fruitless. So the problem is even worse. It's not bad enough that only 30% of criminals arrested by police are getting charged with crimes. But in fact, many of them get away with so much more than that. Because the people of Seattle, the people who own businesses, who work for a living, they've given up. They don't bother calling the police because it's not going to do them any good. It's a waste of time. How sad that this is the state of one of the wealthiest cities in our country, that this is tolerated, that people put up with this. Let's go on. At the time, staff for City Attorney Peter Holmes said they are facing technology, funding, and manpower issues. How is this possible? How is it that one of the wealthiest cities in the entire country is struggling with these sorts of problems? Shouldn't they have enough tax revenue to deal with this? And why are they having such problems if they aren't prosecuting half of the cases? It almost seems like by being overly lenient, by not holding criminals to account, the problem just gets worse and worse. And then the city attorney's office just becomes hopelessly and irreparably behind. That is what it seems like what's going on to me. Pete Holmes is so incompetent, and he's allowed so much crime to take place in the city of Seattle that now even if he decided to get tough and start enforcing the laws, it would be too late. There's just too many broken people out there. The article states, however, in dozens of cases reviewed by Curo 7, it appeared that no additional police investigation was needed before filing charges. No kidding. Most police officers aren't going to submit cases that they know are unwinnable in court. Now, obviously, sometimes police thinks the case is good when it's not very good, but that wouldn't be the case with half of the cases they submit. That's absurd. On the campaign trail in 2009, Holmes made it clear he wanted changes in the city attorney's office. One clear area of change is the overall number of cases filed. In 2011, Holmes' office filed 33% fewer cases than its predecessor did in 2009, according to Seattle Municipal Court records. Well, bravo, I guess that's the change that he wanted. In 2010, Holmes' first year in office, he fired 14 attorneys and replaced some with less experienced lawyers. Great job. I'm sure firing experienced prosecutors and replacing them with baby attorneys really boosted public safety for Seattle. But listen to this quote here. According to a Seattle Times report, they quote former criminal division chief Bob Hood, who had this to say about Pete Holmes. "I have never seen a more inept, disorganized, and quite frankly, vindictive transition than this one in 30 years of public life. I thought Pete Holmes was the guy who smoked weed and was real cool, not the guy who destroyed people's lives by firing a bunch of attorneys for purely personal political reasons. But apparently, I was wrong. Pete Holmes isn't some freewheeling, pot-smoking libertarian. He's apparently actually a vindictive asshole." The article concludes by discussing a report made by Scott Lindsay, who's a public safety advisor to the former mayor of Seattle. And the conclusion to his report indicates that since Pete Holmes became Seattle City Attorney, nothing has changed since these issues were flagged in the Business Association's first report. It would take at least an additional $2 million per year for enough prosecutors and staff to consider all cases for filing within 48 hours of receipt and seeing the cases through to disposition, Holmes said Monday in a statement. "I'd welcome the input of anyone wanting to develop a strategy for how to best increase funding for my office. Hopefully this funding would be coupled with sufficient resources for courts to fashion remedies that best minimize recidivism, substance abuse, and mental health issues." Of course, this is complete bullshit. The reason that Pete Holmes is in this predicament, the reason the Seattle City Attorney's Office doesn't prosecute half of the crimes that get submitted to it, are not because the office lacks resources. It's because of purely ideological reasons. The reality is that if you prosecute all the criminals who commit crimes in any given city, it's going to result in racial disparities. And that's unacceptable for people like Pete Holmes. And I know that's the reason why he doesn't prosecute these cases, because he's directly said it in an interview with Megyn Kelly.
About the city of Seattle and something it calls the social justice program. Seattle deciding that it will not enforce certain laws and policies that it deems racist for minorities. Well, the city was not happy with our report. So Seattle's attorney, its city attorney, is here live with me now to respond.
I have prosecutorial discretion. I can simply decide which cases we're going to charge. And in this case, it furthers public safety and also furthers a race and social justice initiative. The winning combination.
But the reason you're doing that with everyone is because of your concern about illegals getting deported.
That is true.
If you like this video and you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe for more content like this.